All right, welcome back again. Trying to continue with the marathon of videos. Now, on to, I would understand thus far in the videos I have created, or I have published, sorry. Created is different, but also created. The possibly, or if I understand the actually higher important video I have so far begun to make. I doubt any video is comparably as important or will have been as important or will be as important. The issue of what is the comparison of humans to animals, so humans to animals, okay, so sorry, astaghfirullah, the comparison of God to humans to, let's say, like the universe, and to animals or angels or jinn or whatever else is in creation. Okay, so what I'm saying is factually true. There is no argue you are capable to successfully create against me. All you can do is like attack me at like best, if you wish to be evil. Only God, and I'm using human words in English man language, obviously in English, so I can't actually express what God is accurately, but to like a full extent, this is impossible, and as a human it's impossible. But only God is incomparable to every within creation. Nothing within creation is comparable to God. There's nothing. Nothing in the universe, no planet, no amount of force, no human, no, again, sorry to God, but no animal, no angel, no jinn, no anything you could possibly think of. Love is not comparable to God. Hate is not comparable to God. Hell is not comparable to God. Heaven is not comparable to God. The Jews are not comparable to God. Jesus is not comparable to God. There is no prophet comparable to God. There is no Messiah comparable to God. Only God is incomparable. There is no pairing. So we as humans, for instance, we pair with, so a male pairs with a woman or women, and like a female in a sense. Forgetting adult or child or like whatever. We're talking about what I'm expressing is relative to like pairing for like having a situation where a wife is the reality to a male, and a husband to a female, and in unusually high percentage of cases, a mother and a father are essentially in existence. Okay, so incomparable. There's no pair with God. The Jews, this is a issue humans are still not understanding. The Jews are God's chosen people. There is no comparability between God in any of the name you have heard or any of the understanding. There is nothing comparable to God within existence, within creation, within the universe, outside of the universe, whatever there may be. Okay, as a factually true statement. If you ask for evidence, there's like a limit to what I can give you. But this isn't just faith, but I'll say within what I believe faithfully, there is only God, which is incomparable to anything else. Who is, sorry, excuse me, not which is, sorry to God. But so there are several angels likely, which I never want to be around an angel. If I have ever again, never in the past. Okay, so humans actually are closer to what an animal is, though humans are never an animal. Humans never will have been what an animal is, never. Humans are a distinct group made in the image of God, and we have a different hue from each other. So like different color, essentially, different tint from each other. And you can tell disproportionately in the male, we are similar. So if you get the entire male population of man on Earth, and you shave our heads and faces and entire bodies, and if there were a way to add nuclei and cells in, for example, the genitalia, in the muscles, in the fat, and the number percentage, like the body fat was exactly 11 on every single individual I'm describing, and the genitalia were the same length, and generally shaved, everything is shaved. And if we are, for instance, in chains, our appearance is extremely similar. There is very, very little that is different. It's just generally human means like a different color, and the ancestry is different, going back to, there's like a bottleneck at Noah, but it goes back to Seth, male child, to Adam and Eve. Anyways, but like I said, there's a bottleneck at Noah, and he, if I understand correctly, he had 4 sons, and a single of his sons went on to a mountain and refused to enter the ark. So we have 3 sons who entered the ark. I'm not sure if the 4th son actually survived or drowned. I have to read the Quran and double check. But this is the information we have updated thus far as to what was happening. So yeah, I've described some of the sons of Noah in a different video. But yeah, so why do I bring this up? So humans are closer to an animal than to God, because nothing within creation is close to God in any comparable way. We just are the higher because God created us and we resemble God, and we are a distinct group. Okay, and we are similar to each other, male and female in humans, the higher than to anything else in creation except for God. Okay, so now we though are never what an animal is. And we look in the Holy Bible, and like we look in, for example, the Torah, we look in Book of Genesis. We are allowed to control, to even slaughter for consumption. I don't understand what the issue is with slaughtering an animal for like offering, but to avoid, for instance, if there was some scenario, to avoid instance of bloodshed or evil or anything anti-God, this would be an instance. And we, so what am I saying? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, the night has turned into day and I'm still awake. So yes, we are allowed dominion over animals. And if you look at Islam, there's like an advancement in the way animals are to be slaughtered relative to the blood of the animal, and for consumption. But there is within humans, for instance, disproportionately in God's religions, there is like a connection between the earlier religion, which is Islam, and the religion after, which is Judaism, where there's a removal of the allowance within what is essentially clean, in a sense, like a dietary restriction in terms of what is cleanliness of consumption of food and drinking liquids, relative to removing pork, essentially. So there's a connection, and with the earlier religion, Islam, which begins with Adam and continues through to, in terms of prophets, begins with Adam and continues to the last prophet in Islam, who is Muhammad, prophet and messenger, peace be upon him. So there's also a removal within the period of Muhammad, at the latest, let's say, where alcohol is also unclean in terms of dietary allowance, though this is understood at the moment disproportionately to Muslims, and it's different with the Jews, and this relates to time and population number, because the Jews are a people, and there's a mixing with different populations disproportionately, not necessarily in terms of like heterosexual child creating or marriage or wife or husband. And I'm saying wife with the V, obviously. V for Vendetta, just joking, as a movie in the past. Anyways, so, and then you see with, of the three religions which are incorrectly called the Abrahamic religions, are God's religions, with the Christians, for instance, there is the least restriction in terms of dietary consumption, in terms of what cleanliness is, in terms of food and drinking liquid, in terms of consumption and release from the body, and what happens after. There is allowance of alcohol, with, for instance, wine, if we talk about the gospel and what Jesus had relative to. He had need of, use of the use of wine, because he was being limited to water disproportionately. I would understand this as the case. I wasn't there, obviously, but he didn't likely have as much access to milk or honey, for instance, as we look at earlier on. And for another issue, there was the, so Jesus takes on a sort of role of an attorney within like an army, going into a sort of prosecution legally against the Romans for their form of execution, death penalty, capital punishment, the crucifixion. So he takes on this legal role in addition to his ministry, his prophethood, his messiahhood, if I'm saying this correctly. He had many roles, Jesus Christ, but he was a human individual, and he wasn't God ever, not comparable to God at all. Jesus was closer to and is closer to an animal than he is to God. Only God is God, and nothing within creation, nothing within the universe, outside of the universe, in any sense is comparable to God. But so Jesus goes and puts this hit on the Romans, and there are different accounts within history and within the religions as to what happened as a result. But as far as there is agreement, he did live after. And there is, after he puts this hit, he enters Jerusalem and he puts this hit. I was going to say unfortunately. Unfortunately, he also becomes a king in the process. Yes. So what would make me say unfortunately? I guess, sorry, I don't want to puke, but earlier then, a king of the Jews was given capital punishment, a death penalty execution. A king of the Jews, God's chosen people. Jesus Christ was of God's chosen people, an Israelite. He was also a Shem genome individual. I would imagine, not to get into this like enormous debate though, through his mother, for instance. His mother was a Shem genome descended individual. When we talk about the sons of Noah, we're talking about Shem with Jesus. So we see this reality and we see a transformation there where the Romans, and this goes disproportionately into Japheth as a genome, but the Romans are excluded from what the Jews are allowed, in a sense of eventually we see in the followers of Jesus, for instance, in Saul, who becomes Saint Paul, or like Apostle Paul, and he's beheaded. We see, if I remember correctly, John the Baptist, cousin to Jesus Christ, or like relative to Jesus Christ, according to the Quran, if I remember correctly, in his mother, Jesus's mother, Mary, her aunt is the mother of John the Baptist, if I've read correctly, and this is Wikipedia disproportionately, not actually reading the Quran. But we see beheading in various accounts, possibly transitioning into Christian accounts. So there's an issue with beheadings, and I imagine this has something to do with the allowance of eating pork by to the Christians, to remain in terms of dietary law less clean to remain unclean in terms of consumption of food and drinking liquids. But we also have the 7 deadly sins, and in the 7 deadly sins, which the Christians are to understand disproportionately, there's an issue of gluttony. So I have high body fat, but I am capable to not have been a glutton while eating. So it's like, okay, well, gluttony, you might think, if you listen to a certain wife, she turns around and she's like, no, if you eat too much, if you have high body fat, if your body fat percentage has a number of 43, you are at this number a glutton. No. There's in mind and hands what the issue is. So if I'm in a war, for instance, I am allowed to consume the higher, disproportionately, food and drinking liquids because, as for instance, as a man, as a human, though, I'm allowed to consume the higher to become capable, not of wrath, though of higher physical violence, to produce the force to remain meek and to remain gentle, to remain on earth, to be higher merciful because I have higher body size, I develop higher muscle. Even if it's covered in fat, I have disproportionately, usually is the case, that there is higher muscle. Is it like all won't have had less muscle or the same muscle eventually, depending on how much higher the food consumption is? Okay, so you're using force in physics to limit attacks, to limit death. Okay, so the Christians have this understanding, but in terms of dietary law and being clean, Islam has 2 issues. So we have the issue of alcohol, not limited to 2, not only limited to 2, but we have 2 issues: the issue of alcohol and the issue of pork. Of course, there's like the draining of blood, for instance, within dietary law. But these are physically removing some things from an animal. It is easier to just limit to alcohol and to pork, non-consumption. And with the Jews, eventually with time, as humans continue, there will be a differentiation with relation to alcohol and which there's also relation to pork, because alcohol does cause evil within humans because it's an unclean reality. So what makes alcohol unclean? Very obviously, if you've ever drunk alcohol, and if you've ever been drunk or you've almost ever had alcohol poisoning, as I have. So what happens with, and so you are to, as a male, have a harem of wife, is the understanding if you continue to make up for the use of pork or alcohol. And you are, if you use Farsi, so that's with English, but if you use Farsi, you are to remain disproportionately mute in terms of realities if you want to remain disproportionately clean in terms of dietary consumption. So these are differences in what harem, and halal, ha and lal being in Farsi mute, quiet, essentially. So what happens is disproportionately with alcohol, and this is true of different drinks, but if you drink too much alcohol, not only will you have gotten alcohol poisoning, there is also the issue of alcohol does never truly quench thirst. Okay, and I believe the wording goes back to the gospel and what Jesus has is said to have spoken as a human. But alcohol does not quench thirst. Okay, alcohol creates higher amount of thirst. And if we look at Islam, for instance, there's Mecca, there's Medina, there's extremely high temperature, extremely high heat. And we have Arab populations living in desert conditions or arid conditions. So the process of being in terms of diet and dietary unclean with the use of alcohol is extremely connected to evil in a desert location. Because it's harder to have someone thirsting themselves and then need to get a harem of wife and support the wife and attend to their needs, to be mother, for example, to be merciful, and to attend to the children and different issues. Whereas, for instance, if alcohol is used in very cold conditions, let's say Northern Europe, let's say Sweden, for instance, there's an issue of an ability to produce higher amount of work because of the low temperature. There's a capability and an ability to feel higher heat and to produce work in a cold environment. So it's easier to remain quiet of the mouth, but with the hands and the mind to work in a cold environment. So the issue of thirst comes up, and it's still unclean in terms of diet. They think it means allowed and not allowed. It's not allowed and not allowed. It's a dietary clean and unclean is the difference. God is only who allows and does not allow at the only level which is actually accurate. Humans attempt to be accurate and are capable to allow and not allow, but there's a difference between dietary cleanliness and uncleanliness. Allow is, for instance, God is capable, as are humans with attacks, for instance, but in the Quran, I believe, mentions only God knows what is in the womb. So God is what allows conception, not what, oh my God, sorry to God. God is who allows conception of, the sperm and the egg of male and female, husband and wife, for instance. Not in every case, but for instance. So we have these issues and they come up, and animals do not have these issues. They never have the same issues as us. They have a finite amount that they're willing to consume of different realities, but their dietary consumption is different in terms of clean and unclean because they do not have access to the religions, because we humans are different. We have access to religions of God, and sorry, too much talking. We have access to the religions of God, and we are a human, and we are made in the creation of God. And I believe there's been discussion of is God is black? No, God appears as a white Englishman, approximately. Not to make a graven image, but and sorry to God for me to say this, but the appearance of Father Time, approximately with the long hair and the beard, closer no as Jesus, never the same as Jesus Christ. I appear closer to Jesus Christ, though my hair is short. I appear closer to Jesus Christ than Jesus Christ does to God. God is entirely different in terms of appearance. But so animals are different, not only in terms of dietary, because of the religions, not only limited to the religions, but because God has said so. But so another reason which comes up in the movie Pulp Fiction, I believe, which is a really great movie, possibly my favorite movie. My favorite movie is Pulp Fiction. But Samuel L. Jackson, as a character in the movie, explains pigs are unclean. So if I understand correctly, pigs, for instance, which we get pork from, which I've eaten pork. So pork and pigs, pigs will, if I understand correctly, will eat human meat willingly, acceptingly, like not necessarily only unaware, but will continue after aware. Let's say we'll eat pig meat, we'll eat trash, we'll eat forbidden fruit. For example, if apple is the forbidden fruit, pigs will, unaware or aware, eat the forbidden fruit. So this is likely the explanation of why pork is disallowed within Islam and Judaism in terms of dietary cleanliness. Okay, so anyways, also another point, in terms of humans describe evolution at the moment, like Englishman ancestry individuals are talking about evolution and like millions of years. okay, I'm not understanding the time situation in terms of like what actually happened, but never were humans what the apes are. Okay, I've discussed the apes, but never are humans what the apes are. Always humans were separate at Adam and Eve and at creation. So anyways, just wanted to bring up some higher differentiation and stronger understanding of certain realities, factually true realities, actually true realities, and always will have been true realities. But if you would like, have left a comment and I will understand what to describe next. But anyways, continuing, I guess, as a mouth-based Pheidippides in Marathon and what had been in the past going on with Athens. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.